Speeders TV, made possible by Butch and Cheryl King. Justin Hobbs Studio, Falcon Hooks, Basscasters USA, and Pathfinder Outfitters. If the lion is the king of the jungle, then the largemouth bass is the king of fresh water. There's billions of dollars a year spent on bass fishing. Largemouth bass they have an allure that just brings out the best and sometimes the worst in the fishermen. Largemouth bass are some of the most popular sport fish in the United States, and they're distinguished from smallmouth because their mouths extend past their eyes. The smallmouth, the mouth extends only to the middle of the eye. Largemouth bass have a line going down the side of their bodies called the lateral line. Besides threats from humans, largemouth are usually the top predators in the ecosystems that they inhabit. This will include rivers, lakes, reservoirs, across any ponds across the United States. Slow-moving still waters are preferred to those with fast currents, but largemouth survive well in most any waters. Males of this species are known to be highly territorial, especially during mating periods. Spawning seasons depend on location and local climate conditions. And those are some things that we will hit on here pretty soon. Mature largemouth tend to live solitary lives, hiding among plants, roots, limbs, and other forms of structures in the water. They are a ambush predator primarily. Largemouth bass, interesting facts. Indiana state record for largest largemouth ever caught was 14 pounds, 12 ounces. That's pretty awesome. Largemouth is the Alabama state freshwater fish. So they're the fish of Alabama. They were first described by the French naturalist Bernard Germain Lacapadi. I don't know what that is. But he was the one that first found them, I guess. Anglers have the most success catching largemouth bass when waters and weather are warm. And some largemouth have been measured to grow up to 2 feet long. I've seen a lot of largemouth pulled through the ice this year, and I'm talking really nice ones too. Largemouth bass were originally spread throughout the areas east of the Rockies and in the United States, part of southern Canada and northeastern Mexico. But given largemouth proven importance as a game fish, as well as the fish's survival abilities, it's been stocked in many parts of the world, and it's now ranging throughout Central and South America even. What makes largemouth bass so challenging is the fact that these fish are constantly on the move. From day to day, week to week, and season to season, the movement of largemouth bass through the lakes or waterways that you're fishing, it's dictated by water temperatures, spawning desires, and the need to find food while avoiding predators. The first step to becoming a better bass fisherman is understanding how these factors drive bass migrations, so at any given time of the year you'll know where to search for them and how to target them. In the springtime, after the ice is thawed, bass begin moving from the deeper areas where they spent their winter toward the rapidly warming shallow waters. Okay, as that water warms up, the bass will come up, because typically your bait fish will come up as well. However, early spring weather is unpredictable, and as the water temperatures in the shallows fluctuates from day to day, the bass will move back and forth between the shallows and the deep. They want that warm water. You just think about it. When they're cold like that, their bodies are stiff, and their metabolism is really low. They're real lethargic. So that water gets warm, they'll go to the warmer water. If it's warmer on the surface, that's where they'll head. If not, then they'll go back down to the warmer water in the depths. Along with water temperature, the spring largemouth location is driven by the spawning behavior. So fishing can be broken down into 3 stages pretty much. You got pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn. With largemouth exhibiting different behaviors and holding in different locations through each of these stages. Well, the spawn is really a short period of time. So, I mean, yeah, we can categorize it in 3 different ways, but you got to look at what after the post spawn is probably the longest period of time you have. Okay, in the spring, it's good to use crankbaits. Always keep one tied on one of your rods all the time, before, during, and after the spawn. Caught a lot of nice fish on crankbaits after the spawn. If you can walk like the creek banks or river banks, reservoir banks, anywhere where these fish have been spawning, you'll see the brood of hatchlings of the largemouth. That's just a big ball of tiny fish, tiny fry. If you throw beyond that with, say, a square bill crankbait and run your crankbait slowly up to that brood, well, mommy and daddy doesn't like that very well. But you better hold on to your rod, because you won't see them until it's too late, and they will rip that crankbait right out of your hand, man. It is a blast. So before, during, and after the spawn, a bait fish collar square bill crankbait is beautiful. It's deadly. Anything that mimics a minnow or a bluegill, something like that, man, it is good. Okay, if the water's shallow, use a bomber, square A bump crankbait. Knock it off the wood and rock covers and things like that. Pre-spawn, early spring, a largemouth will be looking to feed and regain their weight that they lost during the winter. Okay, they lose a lot of weight because they just don't do it. Like I said, metabolism goes down. They don't chase fish. They don't chase baits and things like that. They just kind of sit there and weather the storm, if you will. So in the springtime, they'll start feeding heavily. Actually, this is with all fish. All the fish come out and they start feeding heavily to start building up for the spawn. They got to carry on their genes. So they want to build up that energy, and until the shallow waters begin to warm, shorelines, points near deep water, sharp breaks that lead to large flats, channels or depressions in spawning coves, or any type of cover in the deeper water located near shallow spawning areas will function as staging areas for pre-spawn bass. Many of these structures are not visible and can be located with electronics, using, again, crankbaits, lipless crankbaits, jigs, so on and so forth. That will any fast moving baits that you can cover water with. Bass moving towards spawning coves will stop and feed at isolated covers such as rocks and trees and undercover or underwater brush and grasses and things like that, and old weed patches from last year hold fish even. So again, use a crankbait, zip it through there, try to entice that bite. It's really not too hard to entice them during early spring because they're in a heavy feeding mode. Bass will begin looking for the warmest available water, and they start moving into the shallows as soon as these areas warm in the sun. Shallow, stained lakes will warm fastest. The bass in these waters will move to the shallows earlier than those in deeper, clear lakes. Look to the northern sections of a large lake, particularly south-facing shorelines that are exposed to the sun for long periods of the day, and protected from the cold northern winds. Protected shallow coves will also retain water that warms quickly in the spring. Avoid shaded areas and things like that in the spring. Now in the spawn, once a temperature in spawning coves is above 60-degree mark, bass will move shallow and spawn. However, water temperature in the shallows can change rapidly, basically overnight. A cold front can chase the bass off their beds and send them right back into the deeps, into the deep, warmer water again. Most of the time, the bass won't move very far, though. If you're catching them a foot off the bank before the cold front, try 5 to 10 feet off the bank in a cold front, and closer to the bottom after the temperatures drop. You'll see spawning beds in the warmest, most protected sections of the lake first. All bass in a body of water don't spawn at the same time. Some bass are spawning while others are still moving up. So when shallow bass are unresponsive, target the bass that are still staying deeper. Though bass in shallow water are often more aggressive, they also experience more angling pressure than bass holding in deep water. Shift your focus to the mid-range and you'll be rewarded. Using jigs and things like that as you get deeper is a little bit of a better way to, not a better way, but a funner way to fish too. That and throw them big worms, the big magnums. The males sit on the beds while the female is out there somewhere waiting and watching as they begin their spawning period. The males make the beds, okay, and the females will stay out there and wait till the time is right. Another benefit to fishing the mid-range depths during pre-spawn is you get a shot at that female, which is lurking in the outskirts, okay? They stay out there while the male prepares the beds, and if you're fishing up there where you see those males preparing beds, the female's out in a little bit deeper water, and the female's the bigger of the species. When the time is right, the female will move up, they'll spawn, and bam, holding in the shallow water for just a short period of time. If you choose to target bass on their spawning beds, it can be easy at this time, man. You can see them. You can throw something in there, that mimics a crawfish or whatever, and they think that the bass will think that this crawfish is eating their eggs, so they'll go and they'll pick it up. And normally they don't pick it up to eat it. They'll pick it up and move it away, try to scare it away from their bed. And as they move it away, obviously it's got the hook in its mouth. You set the hook, and bam, you got a pretty decent fight. Let's talk post-spawn now. After the bass spawn, bluegills move into the same areas and they set up their shop. And this is a great time to catch big bass. Bass will wait at ambush points during bluegill spawning, and they eat lures like crazy at this point in time because they're also trying to gain weight again from the spawning. Spawning takes a lot of weight off of them. So use crankbaits, wake baits, things like that in a bluegill pattern, and you'll take some big fish. Post-spawn bass hold in shoreline cover as the spring weather stabilizes. There's a lot of fishing pressure at this time of year, and to catch more fish, you'll need to get your lure where most guys don't. Weed lines have not yet set up, so bass are keying in on trees and bushes and brush and rocks and things like that. And when fishing a laydown, pitch your bait deeper into the tree than most guys, and don't worry about getting snagged, because if you ain't snagging, you ain't fishing. Summer bass can be tough. The longer, hotter days and direct sunlight can send bass from the shorelines back to the deeper parts of the waterways. The best time to fish are early morning and the last 2 hours of daylight, cloudy days and nighttime, okay? While productive depths during the early summer are dependent on the lake, I like to go 6 to 12 feet of water during the height of summer. Bass move as deep as 15 and 20 feet, especially in the clear water systems. Now in the summer, the weeds have grown up and the bass relate to those. Okay, weed edges are well defined like walls of weeds. They will hold the best fishing. Okay, these edges are defined because of drop off bordering the weeds, and anytime you see grass, man, you want to try to throw into that grass. Okay, Early morning being the best time to do it. They'll be positioned towards the outside of the weeds at that time. So pull right up to it, fish parallel to it, use crankbaits, spinner baits, jigs, try slow rolling spinner bait along the bottom, and that usually will get you a some kind of result. Now during the day, the bass will move to deeper water or deeper inside the weeds because the sun is out and it's a little hotter and it gives away their position. So they're trying to ambush, trying to hide. So you gotta sometimes get up in there and get them. Try throwing a frog into the weeds, pausing it, twitching it, just make it move up in those weeds. Throw a jig into the same weeds, heavy jigs. You want to use heavy equipment. I like a 7-foot heavy action bait caster for throwing into the weeds like that, and use a good strong line. A lot of people like braids. I prefer the monofilaments, and I throw like 17-pound Trilene XL or an XT. In deeper lakes, largemouth will seek out cooler water in the summertime. So they kind of flip flop from their winter. They still go to the same places, but it's for a different reason, if that makes any sense. So move to the offshore structures such as small, medium-sized gravels, hard rock bottoms, underwater humps and points, and so on and so forth. In the fall time, as the water cools, the bass will move shallower to feed and packle and wait for the lean winter. Okay. Once the water drops to 55 degrees, the bite can turn on. Again, another bonus is that few anglers are fishing this time of year. In the fall, a lot of people turn their attention to deer hunting and other activities like that. So once the water starts falling, and get out there, man, and you have a good chance of hooking up with some nice bass. That's when you want to throw your slow, big baits, like the big worms, different things like that. Even a medium-sized spinner bait. You just kind of want to slow it down a little bit and hit the points once again, any structures and stuff like that, anything that adjacent to the deeper water, so they come up and get it. That's pretty much all I'm going to say on the largemouth. There's a reason they're the king of the waterways, and I tell you what, man, they are a blast. I hope you learned something from the video, and I want to thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and if you haven't done so yet, like, share, subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.
What are you talking about? Creek Beaters TV? That's awesome.